Mary Orvis Marbury doesn't say anything about the Epting Hackle in her book, Favorite Flies and Their Histories. The flies in her book are illustrated by her father, Charles Orvis. I am tying the Epting then completely from the illustration. Since I can't find any information about it, I'm assuming that it's named after a person, but I don't know. I'm tying it on a standard number 14 hook. It does seem that hackles were often fished as wet flies. Mary does quote T.E. Pritt in his book Yorkshire Trout Flies, where he asserts that trout take a hackled fly, believing it to be the insect as it is rising from the pupa in a half-drowned state. So that would indicate that they're fishing these as wet hackles. I am using red thread. I have a piece of 4/0 silk thread that I'm going to use for the rib. The body on this fly is red, which I am tying with a strand of dirty bug yarn. The dirty bug yarn I have is a 2-ply yarn that I have separated into single strand. That'll give me a finer body. So having tied that in, I'll just wrap the body with that red yarn. I am suspecting that the fly was originally tied in red wool, which I do not have. I suppose as many red wool flies as I've tied, I could have gone out and found some red wool, but I didn't. And I think this dirty bug yarn, which is probably either cotton or synthetic, will work just as well. So tie that in and tie that off. And then I'm going to counter wrap that silk thread for the rib. And the ribs in the illustration are pretty pronounced, but not very many of them. So a spiral wrap with a rib, catch that thread in and tie it off, clip it out. Now, what is unique about this particular hackle fly is that it has a thorax, and it has a yellow thorax, so I'm going to pinch wrap a piece of yellow floss in, and then it's not very heavy floss, so I'm going to have to do a lot of wraps but create that yellow thorax that is very visible in the illustration. It doesn't seem to be a whole lot thicker than the body is, but I know it is an illustration and not a photograph. So we'll catch that yellow thorax in, tie it off and clip it out, clip out the tag end. The hackle on this fly is brown with a black center, and I don't have any hackle that is exactly that. This is the closest hen hackle that I have. So I've taken one of these feathers, which is more brown than black, and cheated. So I've colored in the center portion of one of those feathers that I believe is the right color brown. With a permanent marker, I'm going to grab the tip of the feather with my hackle plier and then pull back on the hackle that I'm going to wrap. That just leaves that tip out there that I'll tie that tip in. I wrap back on that a little bit too. That'll help keep it in place when I clip it off. cut the tip out. And then use my hackle pliers. Lift up on the hackle and pull back on the fibers as I wrap them around the hook shank. That'll keep the fibers pointing towards the back of the hook as they ought to with this, what is really looking like a soft hackle wet fly. And then I can catch in that stem once I've run out of fibers. That down-eyed hook is causing me a little bit of trouble here. And pull back on everything. One more fiber in there I want to grab. Okay. And I can wrap the red head that's in the illustration. See if I can snap this. There we go. That's a pretty tender stem. Snap that out. Put a whip finish on. Trim out that extra thread. And then for my head cement, I do have diluted goop that I dip a needle in my jar. That picks up a drop, and I can just put that on the head. It'll soak in, and when it dries it'll be clear and a little bit rubbery. So the Epting Hackle from Favorite Flies and Their Histories by Mary Orvis Marbury, as illustrated by her father, Charles Orvis.